Welcome to this presentation of the Silicon Valley Macintosh User Group. In this presentation, SVMUG member Dan Foy discusses how to get the most out of artificial intelligence. Recorded live on July 20th, 2026 from our online session.
All right, I'm Dan Foy. I've been doing a lot of experimentation with a lot of different kinds of AIs, and I thought I would take a little time tonight and kind of share what I've learned, what worked, what didn't work, and really some things that surprised me that I really didn't think was possible. So, um, so really, I think what I can like to talk about is, I mean, our typical pattern with asking computers stuff is Google, right? So when we get AI, we kind of ask it questions like Google, and it actually works pretty well. And we don't get a bunch of, ranked promotional things before what we're interested in. It doesn't come with ads, but we get an answer and it's nice, and we move on. But uh, AI can do an awfully lot more than this. It's been said that using AI like Google is like having a Lamborghini and just listening to the radio. So, um, so, and part of it is demonstrate here for a sample conversation, which I actually pulled today, where I say, "What's a good used Prius?" And the answer I got back was, for value, the best used Prius is 2013 to 2015. Years to avoid for any used Prius, check the battery health, different kind of areas that may have had problems. But then I'll ask it a different thing, add a little more information. A friend of mine is replacing her old car. She knows I have a Prius and like it. The fourth generation is the most reliable, but I'm out of touch with today's prices here in the Bay Area. What should she be looking at? And then it goes into much more detail. It says, for the generation you're after, here's the current Bay Area market. Real asking prices by year mileage above the national average. And so I went back and forth with a little bit more, and I actually got a report that I can show you at the end of the presentation that was very helpful, and my friend was actually used this document and bought the car. So the difference between a generic answer and a comprehensive, useful answer is what you tell it up front. And so I'll go over three different things that I've seen with AI. One is just the simple, regular AI that most people have used, where you're just in a chat bot. But there are techniques to make that work much better than what you might have already experienced. Um, and then the next level is actually a project level, and this is what several services are now offering, where it isn't simply a chatbot, but it's an app you install on your machine, and you then can create a project where our files, you can add the files and it can create files. And the third level is something the buzzwords are agentic, but it's really handing off a task to the AI. And it has some autonomy and takes steps to execute that task for you. So we'll spend most of our time on one and two here, which are where most people can get the most benefit and at the least risk. So what was that? All right. So AI is a thinking tool and doesn't isn't so much about search. Um, it its nature is to predict for LLMs, and so it's been trained on millions of books and all kinds of websites and everything. It's very knowledgeable in a lot of things, but it's at its core recognizes patterns and predicts what it should be doing next, strangely enough. But it works very well. But the example for this is typing things out is green eggs and and no ham would be the next word. And that's very fundamentals of how it thinks. So there's a lot of places that are offering AI that you can use, and the most common one people know and heard of that's been around the longest is ChatGPT from OpenAI, and they've kept up pretty well. The other one that I've been using more is called Claude, and that's from Anthropic. And then Google offers Gemini, and then there are others. Grok, Apple's beginning to produce some of these. And then you can even put some AIs running on your own machine if it's has enough resources. But the things I'll be talking about today will work in any of these three. Okay, so when you're working with AI, we all heard about hallucinations, right? And people immediately think that, oh, it can't be any good if it gets anything wrong. But I think early on, there really was significant hallucinations where it would just go completely off the rails. But that's largely gone. What still is present and you need to be aware of is that, like a person, when you're in a conversation with someone you haven't met, a lot of assumptions come into play. Uh, you, and it has to be, there's no normal shared history between the two of you. And so there are, just a lot of assumptions made. And oftentimes when AI is trying to fill in details, it'll make educated guesses on or estimates. But these things could be wrong. And so it's not inherently not to be trusted, but it can be wrong just like people can be wrong. And sometimes it can state its wrongness with quite a bit of certainty, but people do that too. So, um, and AI really only knows what it was trained on or what it has read when it was being formed. Unless, and the important thing is that you need to give it more than that, which relates to your situation. And so we talked about how you can get different answers with a car, but the answers vary a lot because what I talked about before is when you work with a chat, you're essentially it's you have a relationship of a stranger, right? It does not know you. It's like a new employee, a new intern. It's very capable, but it doesn't know anything about the workplace, doesn't know anything about what it needs to be doing, and it's very reliant on you instructing it what to do so it can be useful. Um, but if you're working with a friend or a longtime colleague, they already know how things work. They know what you expect, and they can be useful without very much communication at all. So, and really the difference when you're talking about AI here, it comes down to what is commonly referred to as context. And context is that implicit background that a friend has. They know about you, but a stranger doesn't. And so having that context makes all the difference in getting a stranger who wants to be helpful to actually be helpful. All right, so we mentioned this before. Um, the the AI has really been exposed to just about everything on the internet, from forums to government sites to everything. So, um, in every new chat, it does that you have, it's again, once again, you are the stranger, right? And then there is no, I mean, it's improving depending on the type you use, but in general, you just start from scratch every time you open a new conversation. But the nice thing about this being a artificial intelligence is you can push back and you can ask it to explain itself and be rather pesky and about how you would do it compared to a person because it really doesn't care. It will just answer the question that you put out. So again, when you, the best way to approach AI is to tell it a lot up front. Any details, the things you already know or tried, what your objective is, a lot about that. And we'll talk about this through the talk. Another thing that's pretty useful and maybe that you might not understand is when you go to a computer and you have a very set thing you want that computer to do, right? You want it to open the file, or you want Google to find you a new pair of sneakers, a specific kind or something. But with an AI, you can really tell it not just what you want to do, but say why you want to do it, right? In this example, someone might be looking for new TV, and on Google they would just say, "Hey, I want a new TV." But with AI, you can say, "Hey, my husband's having trouble with his hearing. The dialogue is is more important than the picture." And then the AI has intelligent enough to say, "Well, instead of buying a new TV, you could get a soundbar or different things like that that might help the real problem and not just what you came in with thinking the solution was." So, like this says, it purpose can open the doors to answers you didn't ask for. And another way to give it context is to hand it pictures, take pictures, hand it PDFs, screenshots, and that gives a picture is like worth 1,000 words, right? So it can give you a lot of information. And so anything at all that you can take a picture of that is kind of part of the problem or the whole problem is you can just attach that to your chat and it will have a lot more to go on. So another thing is, I mean, we're all used to typing stuff because, and as a matter of fact, accuracy kind of mattered because if you're doing a Google search or you're trying to get Siri to do something, better be pretty precise, right? It's got to be right. So we tended to be short and we tended to try to be accurate, and voice was, always kind of a fallback. But on AI, it's actually a better way to interact with it. Even if it doesn't talk back to you, there is a microphone button on every major chat interface. And and why we're talking about using voice is that people communicate primarily by talking. And even though you you can communicate a lot more information a lot faster than you can by trying to type it in. And especially if you're not, lifetime typist that can do 80 words a minute. So it's much better to get a lot of information out. And sometimes your half thoughts that you then switch off from can still provide more context that the AI might inquire about if it seems relevant. So, and you can be completely um, disjointed in your response, and it will work better than if you had typed out a short, terse, accurate system. So when you enter into a response from an AI and you ask it something and it gives you some response, it's probably not going to be exactly what you were looking for. At least not, it might be generally what you're looking for, but you might want it in a different way. You might want more detail. You might want only one option, or maybe misunderstood. And so the great thing about AI is not being a person is you can and should push back to get exactly what you want. And so these are some examples, hey, that's more than I want to spend. That's too much detail. Why are you keep recommending the same brand? I don't understand. Please explain it in a simple way. And that's really important to do, right? This is a machine, even though it has intelligence, and you want to get the best thing out of it you can out of it. So if it's going in a different direction, you have to take the reins and you have to point it in the right way, and you'll get a lot nicer results. The other thing I see a lot, and this has been something I have to fight quite a bit with AI, is AI always likes to get to the answer and the resolution as fast as possible. Usually it's like the first answer is like, oh, here's the answer, right? Because kind of people kind of expect it, and the companies want people to, have their answer. Uh, and so, but what this is again steering the conversation. You're in charge. So when it tries to wrap things up and you're not happy with the way things have gone or that last step, say, no, no, I'm still in the design phase here. We're still looking around. Um, and then continue on the direction you want to go, and it will follow you. You don't have to wrap things up or go on to the next step just because the AI is trying to be helpful and suggest that you should be going on to the next step. If you're not ready for the next step, stay at where you are and just ignore it and tell it, keep the conversation going the way you want it to. So another way to provide more context is to tell the AI to interview you. And this is really nice because you don't have to think of everything that it might need to know. This is an example. We're planning a trip. Before you suggest anything, interview me about what you need to know. Ask one question at a time. And you combine this with the audio, and it's really good because that way you and the AI are going to be on the same page, and it may ask you three questions, it may ask you five. And if you think it's too much, you can just say, I'm done with the questions. Let's move on. So, but this is a great way to get uh, context without you having to think of everything beforehand, because usually it'll ask you something you didn't think to mention, but is still important to understanding what you're trying to deal with. And then this is something that has been like the biggest breakthrough in me using an AI chatbot. And the magic question is like, after I've had a little bit of time with an AI and it seems to be coming to a conclusion, I will always just, even if I like that conclusion or don't, I will always ask, what haven't we discussed yet that might be helpful here? And it will come up with an amazing related things that one or two of which you probably really want to investigate or go in that direction. So, for an example, I, you know, worked in helping people with their security, and so I've gone over the plan with the AI of all the things that we could do. And then okay, what haven't we discussed that might be helpful here? And it says, oh, it says here's several other things we haven't talked about. And so in this case, someone is the same thing Linda was just saying, the grandparent scam, where someone claims to be a family member in trouble. And so this is something that I hadn't put on my list of things to talk about, and that was important to talk about. So, and this question, I think makes is like something completely unique for AI compared to Google, right? Where search engine answers what questions you had, but someone who knows the context will tell you what you didn't think to ask. Okay, so up until now, we've been talking about how to use just a regular chatbot. It's just like you go onto a website and you go to, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and you're just typing in back and forth. Now, there's a whole different, and that's very useful, and everything we talked about will help you with what will apply to that. And then this is a different improved level to give you more context, and that is to install an app that will help you build a project and have something and deal with things that are much longer, much bigger than what you can handle in one conversation. So yeah, and before the first, what we talked about the chatbots, you told everything every time from scratch. And then, but this, you set up a project and then it remembers everything you put into it. And so, and that's has makes it some incredible new options are available when you do this. So on Claude, this is called co-work. On ChatGPT, they just introduced this and it's called work. But it's really support for projects. And that means you have to install an app and not just use the chatbot in the browser. But when you install the app, you can tell it what folder you want to use for this project on your machine. And that gives it permission to read and write from that folder on your machine. And so for these projects, you can add files to that. And so let's see, skip one isn't. So for a project, the project you might be working on may have different files that are related to that project, right? Pamphlets, brochures, pictures, PDFs, spreadsheets, uh, anything like that. Um, it isn't for everything. It is just for the files that are relevant to the project you want to work on. Okay, and then since we're talking about sharing files with AI, we kind of need to touch a little bit on privacy. And clearly, if you wanted to help you with your taxes or any kind of other kind of form that has your social security number on it, or um, maybe bank account numbers, things like that, where you don't want that being sent to a service, then you need to consider what you're sharing with it. And if it does have that kind of information, then you probably need to redact it. But usually it doesn't really care. If to solve your problem, it doesn't need to know your social security number. It doesn't need to know your bank account number. So redaction, right? Um, so the other thing to do is you you go in to whatever service you're on, and there's train on my data, and you need to turn that off so it doesn't end up being baked into the next AI model. And Claude by default does not have that on by default, but ChatGPT does. So it's just simple enough to find and change that. And if you don't know, ask the AI where it is. And so again, with sharing stuff that may have private information, it's like if this company were hacked tomorrow, would you be okay with the things that you had shared online? So, and and really there's not that much out there on your except for things that can be directly used against you. So, I mean, social security numbers and the like. So, to give you a more concrete example of a project, um, if you've been working on a big trip and you can add these files that are related to the trip that you want to take, and you can talk to the AI, and the AI will pick up those files off of your folder and read them and understand more about what you're talking about. Um, And not only that, it can also write files. So it can create itineraries to share, or it can create checklists to a packing list, and it can create that and put it on your machine in your shared folder. So you can say, and it can also keep a running tab of what's left to do for this project and what are the open items. And when you start, and you can come back to this at any time, since it's partly based on files that are stored on your computer. You can re-enter this project the next day and say, oh, before we start today, remind me what we decided, what's still an open issue, and what else, might we need to talk about. And then it'll tell you exactly, what the current status of the project is, and then you can decide what part to chip away at next. And then you can say, oh, let's work on um, you know, this day three of the trip, and they'll just start working on it. So now for large projects, you could do almost anything. I mean, you could use it for like getting home renovations or weddings, moving, small business research, um, all this stuff. It's like very powerful ability to for you to go in and have files that um, and build on things that can be quite complicated and that would be something you would never think to do in a chatbot. So like this says, anything that takes weeks, touches a lot of the files you'll want to remember later, that's a project. So, and for, and the nice thing is, I mean, the fact that this thing can write files for you, it can create a PDF, it can create a slide deck, uh, it can create a summary. So in the case where I did the example at the beginning about the car research, is I had a conversation back and forth with the AI and asked, told it what I was interested in, and asked it my question like, oh, what haven't we discussed that I might need to know? And it says, oh, there's some stuff. And so when I was done, I was about to go on a trip and I couldn't sit down with her in front of a computer. I had to give her something that she could take and that would be enough. And so I said, hey, summarize this. I need to share this with somebody who's not part of this conversation, and what she'll need to use this to help buy the car or research the car. And then, so it created a PDF. You see the first page of here. And then I just emailed it to her, and that was enough. So, and this was just a summary. It doesn't show all the conversation that I went to make this. And in all, I was able to probably do this in 15 minutes of conversation and then tell it to make a PDF. And you can ask it for summary PDFs or reports or anything like this anytime. Like if you're doing something complicated and you need to share it with somebody else, then, go ahead and have that conversation with AI or the project with AI and create documents at the end you can share with other people or use yourself. I mean, travel, you may end up with an itinerary PDF, and you may end up with a packing list PDF and or anything like this. So um, it's quite helpful, all you have to do is ask for it. So to kind of illustrate an example of like both the interview technique and creating a useful document, if you have um, if you a lot of people, as we're getting older, it'd be good to have a document that says, hey, where is everything in case, you know, I'm in the hospital. So I can say, okay, to the AI, interview me. Let's talk about, um, I want to get a PDF for my family in case that I was hospitalized and unconscious. Then, then I'd ask it to interview me and we'd go through this. And then there's also the technique we talked about where saying what haven't we talked about that might be useful, right? And so I can say, what haven't we covered yet? Documents like this usually include, and then it'll tell me, and then we can ask that and add it to the PDF. It says now format as a clean document, I can keep in print. So, and this is not necessarily sharing real personal information, and this is not about necessarily sharing, you know, hackable information. It's just like, this stuff is in this drawer, bank accounts are at this bank, blah, blah, blah. And then when you can share documents, um, it's also very helpful, like terms of service or warranties. You can give it a like 50-page warranty and say, does my extended warranty cover blah, 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 blah example? And it'll tell you very simply and it'll point. And if you're not sure, you can say, please highlight the clause that explains that, this exact thing, what page is it on? And you can go and check it for yourself. Um, Power bills are crazy to figure out. And not only can it read and understand the things, it can check with PG&E's rules and explain what the terms mean or whatever. And really to get it to give because the summary in plain English, um, and what do I need to know? And that's been very helpful to me over time. And again, Linda mentioned this same kind of thing where her doctor, did a recording to get a summary, and I've actually done the same thing for my family members where I have gone in and they recorded the conversation about the doctor, and I was able to transcribe it and then have AI make a summary. And then that was a huge help for them to understand kind of what was said, what was, asked of them, what was going to be, what changes were going to be put into place. So just very useful to have that summary. And I'm really glad to hear that the doctors have started to use that as well. Yeah, and then there's even more places where you can hand paperwork stuff, HOAs, insurance. If you feel like it, you can share, you know, billing statements. Um, and it also getting key dates out of a bunch of statements can be quite helpful around text home. Again, redaction where necessary, but even most statements nowadays do blank out the account number, except maybe the last few digits or something. You just have to look at the risk and feel what you're comfortable with sharing and what you're not. So on the project level, we're really talking about uh, you showed it what the context was, all the files and everything, and you got, a real project level stuff done with it. Okay, so the next part here is really about the next capability, which is called agents. And it's a bit more advanced. I'm only going to touch on it briefly. But where it differs is it again runs on your computer, but it has a little more control over not just reading and writing documents, but it can actually examine more of your files. It can maybe run little command line programs. Uh, it's basically very effective for automation. And and so I've been able to put it to use to do very specific tasks that would be otherwise not possible with just straight things like shortcuts and similar automation tools. Um, let's see. So, and this is and again, and also this is something that you learn to use over time when you get comfortable with AI. It's just, what it will do and won't do and what its limits are. And if you've done projects with it and had it comfortably use it, files on your computer, then being able to give it small tasks to run by itself is kind of a natural next step. But trust is always earned, and I wouldn't suggest that you start off in these places. You start off with just the asking and then a small project. So for me, I like listening to podcasts and some YouTube channels. And what I would do by hand was for the ones that I liked, I would like to take notes on it. And so I would by hand download a podcast, and then I would use a program called Mac Whisper to transcribe it. And then I would copy that transcription into an AI program and say, summarize this for me. And then I would take that summary and then I would drop it into my notes program where I create a note uh, where I could put the summary in it so I could find this stuff later on. So this was a pretty manual process, time consuming. And what I did is I trained an agent to do all these steps by itself, where I really only had to do one of two ways. I could either say, please summarize the latest episode of this podcast. And it would go out and it would automatically go find the podcast. It would go download the podcast. It would transcribe the podcast. It would summarize the podcast. it would put it in a note and put it in the filing system that I wanted it filed in. And that happened all by me just asking for the latest episode to summarize it. So that saved me a lot of work since I was doing this by hand before. And this could be the same kind of thing where it's like a not very automatable type of steps. It is possible in some cases to have an agent do these things for you. But again, this is something that you learn and work over time. Um, and in this case, I actually am using an AI that's running only on the Mac. It's independent of the internet. It can do all the stuff and the summary and the note creation and follow the instructions. And it's not even using the cloud AI at all. And it's local AI is kind of finicky. It's a kind of a hobbyist type level work. And but it is possible out there to do things entirely private with AI. I have used it to do redactions of PDFs and other things to get personal information out of it without me having to do it. And I can trust that it was happening because it was only happening on my computer. It wasn't using a cloud AI. Okay. Like I was saying, you start small, you check its work, and you hand off more as it earns it. So, um, so that's where, and I think we're already seeing Apple kind of move in this direction with, say, the ability for Siri to set up, shortcuts in a way that can do a complicated multi-step task for you, right? So this even Apple will start to introduce agent type behavior in the phones and computers. This is just a earlier version of it. So, all right. And then anyway, back to what you might try. And if you're using just a chatbot, then try the magic question of what haven't we discussed yet that might be helpful. And that's always really useful. Um, you'll be surprised at what it can come up with. And then if beyond that, if you go beyond a chatbot and you decide to try an AI that can do a project, you can start a project and start something that will be bigger than what you could have done with just a single chat. So, and then if you do want to step into agents, you can give it one small multi-step chore and see how it does. So that is a presentation. I think really it's amazingly powerful if you're willing to give it a try and you know some techniques that will help you get the most out of it. So anyway, I'd like to pause here and allow people to ask questions.
Dan,
Yeah.
what is that you mentioned there's an app or you were running something that just runs on your Mac. What is that?
That is you can get there's a couple things that actually there's like three layers to this. If you're familiar with like old school basic, it was you or just a scripting language, you can load a basic program, but it's just text, right? But you needed an interpreter to run it. And then and that would actually turn that text into something usable.
So this is not an AI app? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can, there's a lot of open source AIs you can
Oh, it's open
download.
source. Okay.
Okay. And then you run them with something there's like a LM Studio is the one I use, but there's Olama and a few things like that, they, pro- they run and they'll load the data in of the particular AI that you can fit on your machine. And you can then interact with it as a chatbot there.
Okay.
Okay,
All
so
right.
this is working with tools that you have downloaded and in some cases compiled specifically to run on your local machine.
That's right. And the key to making that be effective is you need at least a M series chip,
Right.
because the has unified memory and all that stuff can run the mathematics quite quickly relative to the old Intel chips.
Right.
You need a good amount of memory.
Okay.
16 gigabytes, you can run some local models, but they're very small and their utility is limited. I happen to have a 32 gigabyte MacBook Pro, and that affords me the ability to run some pretty useful small models.
Gotcha.
So
To
yeah,
that-
it helps to have RAM, and
Yeah.
it definitely helps to have an M series processor.
Okay.
To that end, should we expect to be able to do this using Apple's coming new Apple Intelligence models?
I think so. I mean, I don't know a lot about them, but my impression is that they will provide capabilities. I'm sure that Apple will have a lot of um, constraints around them. That's the way Apple does things, is it doesn't offer a million options. It offers just a few, and it slowly grows from there. So um, for local models, yeah, I wouldn't, we're close enough now to having um, the AI from Apple come out. And if you weren't an enthusiastic hobbyist about it, then you would be better to wait for the Apple foundation models to come out when they do late this year.
Okay. Okay.
So what's the
I
state?
have I have a question.
Yes.
Uh, I have a computer with the last Intel chip.
Mhm.
You know, it was the highest thing, and I was wondering how AI can that go back as far as my system?
Go ahead. You-
Yeah, although you'll have to be using a cloud service. Um, there's a difference between running a completely private AI on your own machine, which is a very limited kind of AI, and using a paid for service where you are using it that's running on someone's server. And so most of the utility, even for me, comes from running the ones that are on the servers. And it doesn't matter if you can get on the internet, you can use those cloud models and you can do everything everyone else can do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So of the three that you mentioned, yeah, Chat GPT, Claude, and Gemini, which is the one that would be, let's say, the safest or the least invasive, or one that's, you can feel comfortable with?
I feel the most comfortable with Claude. Um, I think I've used ChatGPT in the past, and my own experience has been they tend to make the defaults not private, and and I think Anthropic has some of their own actions um, with politically in terms of kind of getting themselves not accepting the terms the U.S. government wanted for allowing anything at all, including automated weapons and the like. Uh, I'm just happier with the default privacy that's baked in. But so for just a strict example, ChatGPT, you do have to go in and say, don't train um, using my data, because it'll be by default on. Anthropic, by default, it is off, right? So I'm just more comfortable with Anthropic, but it doesn't mean I give them everything, right? I do still redact personal information I think is overly sensitive. So yeah, but I personally I like that. And Google, I mean, Google's model is extracting your information, so I'm not too keen on Google for that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
You've got some things in chat. Gerald is asking, I don't quite understand the question, but he says, does an AI have a name? I'm not sure what he's asking. So Gerald, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question here?
Well, I'm curious whether were we just talking about something that's a piece of software,
Hmm?
or are we talking about something that it has more like a person, more human maybe? Or do I do
Yeah,
so if
I
I'm
understand what you mean. It is a lot more person-like than anything that's come before, but it is not conscious or alive in the way that even
well, I understand that part. I just wondered if I'm looking for an AI, do I say, can you tell me about Sherry or you tell me about George, that kind of thing?
you mean ask it about other people you might know.
Yes,
No, it's not going to know who those people are. It's been trained by looking at, reading a lot of books, reading a lot of websites. It does know celebrities and the same thing that level that you would get by reading the internet yourself, but it is not going to know personal people. I mean, your average person.
That's supposed to be one of the coming advantages on Apple's model is because since that's on your local machine, it's going to have access to that sort of information.
Exactly. And that's why, because by default it doesn't have it unless someone gives it access, in this case, Apple. But in my talk, I'm talking about providing context, which is you giving it that information as it's needed to make sure it helps you.
Yeah.
so I think I've heard that some AIs are specialized. In other words, there are some that know more about science, maybe some that may be more artistic. Or any thoughts about that?
Good question.
Yeah, there's a lot of the models right now have been trained by just throwing everything they can at it, like the entire internet and like all the ebooks they could get their
Yeah,
hands on and everything like that. So usually AIs that you go out and purchase use of right now are very much, well read across to everything.
kind of
Uh,
general then,
yeah. So,
huh?
I mean, I think it is a direction that they're going to move to try to train them just on certain topics to make them smaller and more portable and use less resources. Because, I mean, if you have an AI that is um, just helping you with your files on computers, it doesn't have to know about the fall of the Roman Empire. So, and that stuff, all this other, all those other things that does need to know about still take space and resources. So,
Mhm.
it really should. Um, Ideally, I think we will see more and more specialized stuff, and I think they'll do more and more better and better for their specialty because of it.
Thank you.
On a general level of that, I would expect there are a lot of specialized AI engines being made out there, but the vast majority of them are for use internal to specific companies. In a few circumstances, they are making those with public gateways from those companies' web pages. But that's largely the frontier right now of AI and how companies are using it. So
Exactly. Yeah.
a prime example I can find at present is the growing amount of AI being used for customer support.
Right.
But there is also at the same time an increasing amount of, a specialized legal one, a specialized medical one, all of which generally the AI companies and the specializing companies will want you to pay for.
Right. And that's true. It's just you're not going to, as a ordinary consumer, go out and find and sign up for, a specialized AI. They're kind of the exception.
Mm.
I,
And
I think that brings another question. What kind of cost are we talking about here?
Right now, they're pretty heavily subsidized, and many of the chat ones you can use at no cost for moderate use. The stuff that Claude Cowork and the project level stuff, there are $20 a month plans.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, I mean, these are subsidized in the same way that most tech works, right? I mean, they make it, as low cost as possible at first, and eventually the prices go up when people adopt it into their life. But
Now,
uh,
if the
Is
cheapskate,
there a point where, say, I subscribe to one AI for say 6 months? Is that gonna get? Am I gonna get enough information I could say I don't need to subscribe any longer and still use it, or is this something that I'm gonna have to pay for forever?
it's a good question. And the thing is, the important thing to know, the bigger picture here, is that AI is changing incredibly fast. Even 3 months ago, it wasn't nearly as capable as it is right now.
Really?
And
Okay.
even in the last week, they've introduced new variations of models that change. It's a horse race of who's in front all the time, and they each jump ahead in a matter of weeks. So, I mean, all the plans I've seen, they have a monthly plan that you can cancel anytime. So you can buy it a month at a time, and if you think that you would rather go to something else, or something else comes that's more appealing or is much more powerful, you can cancel your existing one and pay the $20 to the next one.
I
So
see.
don't get a 1 year subscription. Things change way too fast.
Gotcha. That sounds like good advice. Thank you.
Sure.
so if I'm a cheapskate
Mhm.
and I decide that I don't want to actually have a paid account or
Mhm.
an account of any sort, or even download the apps, how much of this am I really capable of?
You don't want to, well, I mean, I think most of them, if you go to the website, you can use their chat client for free. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you can use Grok and you can just type in a question and answer, and it may limit you as far as how much you can use it at one time, and it may not use the very latest models, but you can definitely do a lot right now for free with almost any of them. It's just not going to be their best, and it won't be the most capacity. Um, but you can definitely use AI for free. I mean, just almost in the same way you can use Google search for free.
Yeah, because I
So,
see for a lot of the stuff you're mentioning there, for like the first level of asking questions and getting advice and the like, it works, pretty decently on that.
mhm.
But as soon as I try to do something with a larger or deeper conversation, getting into the level 2 project stuff, it really can't handle that.
Yeah, you will need to pay the $20 a month to do the project level stuff. You won't have access to that. That is a paid tier, but $20 a month is a pretty small amount considering what capability you get in return.
It might also be worth it for those that are on a really tight budget to just run the beta on Apple Intelligence and play with it and see what you could get. Because I'm hearing good things about it. I have done almost nothing myself because I haven't installed the beta yet. But from what I'm hearing, there was a good bit of discussion about that at MacStock, and I think that's at least worth a try. Assuming you have, either you're willing to take the risk on your production machine, or you have a spare Mac or a spare phone, etc., or an iPad that you don't use for much, and it would be okay if you have a problem with with the beta. So, Robert, you're running the beta, are you not?
Yes.
Any comments as to stability or experience with the AI?
Well, actually, it's been very stable. And you may remember I sent you a comparison of responses from Gemini, Siri, and ChatGPT. And I found they were very comparable, in their type of response. Um, you know,
How long ago was that you sent that?
oh, it was a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. I'm just thinking in terms of what Dan commented on about that, like essentially every week or so, two things are changing. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know if they are refining Siri as they do so, but I'm now up to beta 4,
Ah,
or the developer beta on 27. Let's see, Marty just said something here.
once you sign up for the beta, you have to
Oh,
turn
yeah,
on,
that's true. Yeah.
yeah, Siri AI, and then your device needs to index your information. Right.
What does
Yeah,
that
it
mean? What
indexed.
does that mean, index information?
Uh, Basically, it is going through everything I have on my hard drive and uh, putting it into its own local memory. Just indexing it the same way that a web crawler would index the web, I think.
Or Spotlight.
Or Spotlight, yes.
Spotlight's probably a better example because it's local,
Mhm.
right?
Well, this all makes me curious. So I'm a guy that's just kind of been sitting in the background watching things happen. Where do I start? What would you recommend that you do to get to learn this thing and understand what's going on and so forth?
Have you
Uh,
used have you ever used a chatbot? Have you ever asked a question of an AI?
No, not
Okay.
that I know of.
Okay. I mean, you can just go to let's see, chatgtp.com or anthropic.com. I can share a couple links.
Yeah, the other thing you could do if you ask Siri a question on your Mac, if you're running an up-to-date Mac, and then just say, type in, ask ChatGPT, blah, whatever you want to ask.
Ah, that
You'll be,
easy, huh?
yeah, that
Okay.
easy. It's already on your Mac and also I mean, you can do the same thing on your phone, assuming you're running the current OS.
I am.
Okay.
And I'd like to have an M3 too, but I can't find one.
Yeah, see what you get by just doing that. I mean, that's a start, and then you can use the links that Dan is providing. But that if you say ask ChatGPT, blah, that way your privacy is protected because you're going through Apple. Depending on what again, depending on what you want to use, you might not care, but if you do,
Yeah. If you
yeah,
just want to learn though, I mean, you could just ask non-personal questions at ChatGPT or um, I think Claude does want you to sign up for an account at least.
yeah.
So yeah, or if you go onto Twitter, there's Grok and you can click on that but I'll share one link right here for ChatGPT. I just suggest you keep anything significantly personal away from it.
You're putting that in the chat in Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit of I'm not sure what to say, but anyway, I attend about 4 or 5 computer club meetings every month.
Mm-hmm.
One that I was really kind of interested in was one that this fella had used his iPhone, his computer, and what is it? Chat,
GPT.
whatever.
Yep.
But he had gone around his house and he'd photographed and talked about various things he had in his house. And then he asked the GPT thing to make him a list, give him an estimate of what the value was, and so forth. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for insurance. Excellent. Excellent idea.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Other questions? Anybody? Comments for Dan?
Very good, Dan. Thank you.
Excellent,
Sure. All
Yep.
right.
Dan.
Thank you.
Really good. Oh, your slides will be on the YouTube slide because your slides are excellent too. Good information.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. And let me know if any other questions come up.